just wish he knew. I just wish he knew.
And we're back again. Wouldn't you know it? Sorry I wasn't live last night. I know I was supposed to be. But the damn computer cock-blocked me on my stream. Told me no. No, fuck you. I'm doing an update. I'm like, okay. Well, I'll just stream after the update. Fine, that's fine. Whatever you want to do, fucking computer. And the thing told me to go fuck myself. Decided to continually update until like 4:30 in the morning. Ugh. Want to talk about annoying as all hell. Man. At any rate, I'm going to open up a few things here, and then we'll get started with the end of Napoleon. Finn. Did I name this fucking title this correctly? No, I did not. I'm going to have to go in and change that at the end. After I'm done streaming, I'm going to have to change the damn name. It didn't carry over from last night. Ugh. Bummer. When you think you have everything set up. Still a noob. Still a noob. Guess we're working it out. Guess we're working it out. Alright. Switch over here. Bada bing. No, the title isn't correct at the moment. I'll change it after the stream is done. War of the Seventh Coalition and the end of the Napoleonic Wars, with his exile and his death due to stomach cancer, which was debated for a little while, but evidently the final consensus is he actually did die from stomach cancer. But it's most likely due to the living conditions he was left with. Now, before we talk about any of that, the Seventh Coalition, 1815, pitted Britain, Russia, Prussia, Sweden, Switzerland, Austria, and the Netherlands, and several smaller German states against France. The period known as the 100 Days began after Napoleon escaped from Elba and landed at Cannes, the 1st of March, 1815. Traveling to Paris, picking the support as he went, he eventually overthrew King Louis XVIII. The Allies rapidly gathered their armies to meet him again. Napoleon raised 280,000 men whom he distributed among several armies. To add to the 90,000-strong standing army, he recalled well over 250,000 veterans from the past campaigns and issued a decree for the eventual draft of around 2.5 million new men into the French army, which was never achieved. Only about a small fraction of that is what he was able to accrue. This faced an initial coalition force of about 700,000, although coalition campaign plans provided for 1 million frontline soldiers, supported around 200,000 garrison, logistics, and other auxiliary personnel. Napoleon took about 124,000 men of the Army of the North on a preemptive strike against the Allies in Belgium. He intended to attack the coalition armies before they combined in hope of driving the British into the sea and the Prussians out of the war. He marched to the frontier, achieved the surprise he had planned, catching the Dutch army in a dispersed arrangement. The Prussians had been more wary, concentrating 75% of their army in and around Ligny. The Prussians forced the Armée du Nord to fight all the day of the 15th to reach Ligny in a delaying action by the Prussian First Corps. He forced Prussia to fight at Ligny on the 16th of June, 1815, and the defeated Prussians retreated in disorder. On the same day, the left wing of the Armée du Nord, under the command of Marshal Michael Ney, succeeded in stopping any of Wellington's forces going to aid Blücher's Prussians by fighting a blocking action at Quatre Bras. They failed to clear the crossroads, and Wellington reinforced the position. But with the Prussian retreat, Wellington too had to retreat. He fell back to a previously acquired position on an escarpment at Mount St. Jean, a few miles south of the village of Waterloo. Napoleon took the reserve army of the North and reunited his forces with those of Ney to pursue Wellington's army, after he ordered Marshal Grouchy to take the right wing of the Army of the North and stop the Prussians regrouping. In the first of a series of miscalculations, both Grouchy and Napoleon failed to realize the Prussian forces were already reorganized and were assembling at the city of Wavre. The French army did nothing to stop a rather leisurely retreat that took place throughout the night and into the early morning by the Prussians. I think I have a picture of Wavre. Yes, I do. Boom shakalaka. The French army did nothing to stop a rather leisurely retreat that took place throughout the night and into the early morning. As the 4th, 1st, and 2nd Prussian Corps marched through the town towards Waterloo, the 3rd Prussian Corps took up blocking positions across the river. And although Grouchy engaged and defeated the Prussian rear guard under the command of Lieutenant General von Thielmann in the Battle of Wavre, 18th and 19th of June, it was 12 hours too late. In the end, 17,000 Prussians had kept 33,000 badly needed French reinforcements off the field. Dang. Rejected. Napoleon delayed the start of the fighting at the Battle of Waterloo on the morning of the 18th of June for several hours while he waited for the ground to dry after previous night's rain. By late afternoon, the French army had not succeeded in driving Wellington's forces from the escarpment on which they stood. When the Prussians arrived and attacked the French right flank in ever-increasing numbers, Napoleon's strategy of keeping the coalition armies divided had failed, and a combined coalition general advance drove his army from the field in confusion. Grouchy organized a successful and well-ordered retreat towards Paris, where Marshal Davout had 117,000 men ready to turn back the 116,000 of Blucher and Wellington. General Vandamme was defeated at the Battle of Issy, and negotiations for a surrender begun. On arriving at Paris 3 days after Waterloo, Napoleon still clung to the hope of a concerted national resistance. But the temper of the legislative chambers and the public generally did not favor his view. Lacking support, Napoleon abdicated again on the 22nd of June 1815, and on the 15th of July he surrendered to the British squadron at Rochefort. The Allies exiled him to a remote South Atlantic island of St. Helena, where he died on the 5th of May, 1821. In Italy, Joachim Murat, whom the Allies had allowed to remain king of Naples after Napoleon's initial defeat, once again allied with his brother-in-law, triggering the Neapolitan War, March to May 1815, hoping to find support among Italian nationalists. Fearing the increasing influence of the Habsburgs in Italy, Murat issued a Rimini proclamation inciting them to war. The proclamation failed, and the Austrians soon crushed Murat at the Battle of Tolentino, the 2nd and 3rd of May, 1815. Forcing him to flee, the Bourbons returned to the throne of Naples on the 20th of May, 1815. Murat tried to regain his throne, but after that failed. He was executed by firing squad on the 13th of October, 1815. The Second Treaty of Paris, signed on the 20th of November 1815, officially marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars, and we have completed it in just 17 minutes. I'm just kidding. There's a couple of other things I want to go over as well. Like, for instance, the Napoleonic Wars brought radical changes to Europe. But the reactionary forces returned and restored the Bourbon house to the French throne. Napoleon had succeeded in bringing most of Western Europe under one rule. Most European countries' subjugation in the French Empire brought with it many liberal features of the French Revolution, including democracy, due process in courts, abolition of serfdom, reduction of the power of the Catholic Church, and demand for constitutional limits on monarchs. Most of that's kind of an L, I'm not gonna lie. Like, the liberal stuff, democracy kind of sucks. Reducing the power of the Catholic Church, fail. Due process in courts, okay, that's kind of a win. Abolition of serfdom, that's a neutral. That's a neutral in my book. And demand for constitutional limits on monarchs. I don't know if that one's kind of neutral to me too. I don't really have a big take on that, right? I don't really have a huge take on that. But the increasing voice of the middle classes with rising commerce and industry meant that restored European monarchs found it difficult to restore pre-revolutionary absolutism and had to retain many of the reforms enacted during Napoleon's rule. Institutional legacies remain to this day in the form of civil laws, with clearly defined codes of law and enduring legacy of Napoleonic code. France's constant warfare with the combined forces of different combinations of, and eventually all, of the other major powers of Europe for over 2 decades finally took its toll. By the end of the Napoleonic Wars, France no longer held the role of the dominant power in the continental Europe, as it had since the times of Louis XIV, as the Congress of Vienna produced a balance of power by resizing the main powers so they could balance each other and remain at peace. In this regard, Prussia was restored in its former borders, and also received large chunks of Poland and Saxony. Greatly enlarged, Prussia became a permanent great power. In order to drag Prussia's attention toward the West and France, the Congress also gave the Rhineland and Westphalia to Prussia. These industrial regions transformed agrarian Prussia into an industrial leader in the 19th century. Britain emerged as the most important economic power, and its Royal Navy held unquestioned naval superiority across the globe well into the 20th century. Remember that when we go over, so when we move forward and we eventually get to stuff leading up to World War I and World War II, and then eventually do World War I and World War II, this is going to be important. After the Napoleonic period, nationalism, a relatively new movement, became increasingly significant. It shaped much of the course of the future of European history. Yes, it did. That's part of my point. Its growth spelled the beginning of some states and the end of others. As the map of Europe changed dramatically in the 100 years following the Napoleonic era, rule by fiefdoms and aristocracy was widely replaced by national ideologies based on shared origins and culture. Bonaparte's reign over Europe sowed the seeds for the founding of a nation-states of Germany and Italy by starting the process of consolidating city-states, kingdoms, and principalities. At the end of the war, Denmark was forced to cede Norway to Sweden, mainly as compensation for the loss of Finland, which the other coalition members agreed to. But because Norway had signed its own constitution on the 17th of May, 1814, Sweden initiated the Swedish-Norwegian War of 1814. We get into that one eventually, too. The war was a short one, taking place between July 26th and the 14th of August, 1814, and was a Swedish victory that put Norway into a personal union with Sweden. The union was peacefully dissolved in 1905, where they became two definitive separate countries. The United Kingdom of Netherlands, created as a buffer state against France, dissolved rapidly with the independence of Belgium in 1830. The Napoleonic Wars also played a key role in independence of Latin American colonies from Spain and Portugal. The conflict weakened the authority and military power of Spain, especially after the Battle of Trafalgar, where there were many uprisings in Spanish America, leading to the Wars of Independence. In Portuguese America, Brazil experienced greater autonomy as it now served as a seat of the Portuguese Empire and ascended politically to the status of kingdom. These events also contributed to the Portuguese Liberal Revolution in 1820 and the independence of Brazil in 1822. A century of relative transatlantic peace after the Congress of Vienna enabled the greatest intercontinental migration in human history, beginning with a big spurt of immigration after the release of the dam erected by Napoleonic Wars. Immigration inflows relative to the U.S. population rose to record levels, peaking at 1.6% in 1850 and 1851, as 30 million Europeans relocated to the United States between 1815 and 1914. 30 million in 99 years. $30 million in 99 years. How many have come over just in Biden's presidency alone? Just throwing that out there. Another concept emerged from the Congress of Vienna, that of a unified Europe. After his defeat, Napoleon deplored the fact that his dream of a free, peaceful European association remained unaccomplished. Such a European association would share the same principles of government, system of measurement, currency, and civil code. 1.5 centuries later, and after 2 world wars, several of these ideals re-emerged in the form of the European Union. Legend. Until the time of Napoleon, European states employed relatively small armies made up of both national soldiers and mercenaries. These regulars were highly drilled professional soldiers. Ancien regime armies could only deploy a small field armies due to rudimentary staffs and comprehensive yet cumbersome logistics. Both issued combined to limit field forces to approximately 30,000 men under a single commander. Military innovators in the mid-18th century began to recognize the potential of an entire nation at war, a nation at arms, or nation in arms, kind of like the United States. Half the world's guns or more. The scale of warfare dramatically enlarged during the Revolutionary and subsequent Napoleonic Wars. During Europe's major pre-Revolutionary War, the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763, few armies ever numbered more than 200,000, with field forces often numbering less than 30,000. The French innovations of separate corps, allowing a single commander to efficiently command more than the traditional command span of 30,000 men, and living off the land, which allowed field armies to deploy more men without requiring an equal increase in supply. Arrangements such as depots and supply trains allowed the French Republic to field much larger armies than their opponents. Napoleon ensured during the time of the French Republic that the separate French field armies operated as a single army under his control, often allowing him to substantially outnumber his opponents. This forced his continental opponents to also increase the size of their armies, moving away from the traditional, small, well-drilled, ancient regime armies of the 18th century to mass conscript armies. The Battle of Marengo, which largely ended the War of the Second Coalition, was fought with fewer than 60,000 men on both sides. The Battle of Austerlitz, which ended the War of the Third Coalition, involved fewer than 160,000 men. The Battle of Friedland, which led to the peace with Russia in 1807, involved about 150,000 men. After these defeats, the Continental Powers developed various forms of mass conscription to allow them to face France on even terms, and the size of field armies increased rapidly. The Battle of Wagram of 1809 involved 300,000 men, and 500,000 fought at Leipzig in 1813, of whom 150,000 were killed or wounded. About 1 million French soldiers became casualties, wounded, invalided, or killed, a higher proportion than the First World War. The European total may have reached about 5 million military deaths, including disease. France had the second largest population in Europe by the end of the 18th century, 28 million as compared to Britain's 12 million and Russia's 35 to 40 million. It was well poised to take advantage of the levée en masse. Before Napoleon's efforts, Lazare Carnot played a large part in the reorganization of the French Revolutionary Army from 1793 to 94, a time which saw previous French misfortunes reversed, with Republican armies advancing on all fronts. The French army peaked in size in the 1790s, with 1.5 million Frenchmen enlisted, although the battlefield strength was much less. Haphazard bookkeeping, rudimentary medical support, and lax recruitment standards ensured that many soldiers either never existed, fell ill, or were unable to withstand the physical demands of soldiering. About 2.8 million Frenchmen fought on land and about 150,000 at sea, bringing the total for France to almost 3 million combatants during almost 25 years of warfare. So I've heard a couple of discussions about, I'm just going to stop there for a second, and we're going to talk about this. I've heard a couple of discussions recently about, like on the Whatever podcast, I'll bring up who's the bigger victim of war, men or women. And quite obviously, it's fucking men. 5 million of them died in Napoleonic Wars. It's fucking ridiculous. And that's just Europe. That wasn't like United States, Japan, and Asia involved in, like, World War I or II. You know what I mean? Like, holy shit. It's just in fucking continental Europe. Some of the shit leaked over to the United States and Latin America, yes. Right? But the meat of the people that perished were European. The 5 million is European deaths. I'm sure there was more than 5 million, but the 5 million is European. Now, my point being, right, is there was another discussion I was listening to, or heard somebody talking about, where they were saying you can't conscript people that are like, that can't do it. Well, the French did. In the Napoleonic Wars, they literally had people in their armies that are like paraplegic and can't operate anything, but they're still considered a part of the army so that they can increase their numbers and inflict a level of fear on their enemies. Because propaganda and illusions. Oh shit, Napoleon has 2.5 million people in his army. What are we gonna do? Nobody comes even close. And it's like, well, yeah. A bunch of those people are fucking vegetables, are dead or whatever, you know what I mean? They're too old or too young to fight, but they're still considered part of the military. It's an intimidation tactic. One of Napoleon's biggest tactics was deception. And that's part of it, right? And that's another thing, like, with the whole anti-Russian propaganda campaign we have going on right now, with the, like, oh, they're losing, they've lost so much, they're in, you know, military strife and whatever else. I've done a lot of research over the past fucking month or so to compile up a shit ton of information from a shit ton of different sources, including Russian news sources, right? Like, I went into European sources, not just American sources, because you get bullshit information here in America. I think all of it's bullshit. But as of 2024, okay, regardless of the ongoing conflict, they have about, I'm going to say anywhere in between, because the stats are varying, very highly varying. And I'll point out that the United States reports on the stats are extremely one-sided and very, very, like, you can tell they're kind of manipulated. They're kind of manipulated, because the rest of Europe is like, while it varies, it's like, it varies within a bracket of like 900,000 to 1.5 million, right? Active military personnel. And the United States is over here like reporting super low, like mid 500,000 numbers. Evidently, their reserve forces are around 2 million, in between 1.8 and 2.2 mil. I'm going to go ahead and say it's right in the middle. They have a shit ton of military aircraft, and they do have a shit ton of warships left. Well over 700 warships and over 4,000 military aircraft. So, to say that they're not a threat and that they couldn't just literally lay waste to the rest of Ukraine right now if they fucking wanted to is absurd, because I've been saying since the beginning of the war, Putin's been going light. If he wanted to just completely lay waste, he would. Now, moving back on to Napoleonic Wars, I just wanted to throw that out there. Hey, Dano, let's go. What's up? How you doing? Britain had 750,000 men under arms between 1792 and 1815 as its army expanded from 40,000 men to in 1793 to a peak of 250,000 in 1813. Over 250,000 sailors served in the Royal Navy. In September 1812, Russia had 900,000 enlisted men in its army, and between 1799 and 1815, 2.1 million men served in its army. Yeah, Russia has always had a massive army, dude. Massive army. Like, Russia hasn't been fucking around. Regardless that they fucking, tanked because communism, that doesn't mean that their fucking military strength is weak, right? Their industry might be a little lacking, but their personnel is fucking massive. They're one of the top 4 countries in the world, military strength-wise. Ironically, ahead of India and behind the United States and China, who evidently have stronger military. We have less active military personnel, and we're actually going to drop off that list if our recruitment rate stays the same. If it trends the same way, we're gonna wind up being 5th and then 6th and then 7th really fucking quick. We're gonna drop down that list. We're not gonna be top dog anymore. So, just throwing that out there. Fucking, if they have to, stopping by on your way to bed, well, sir, have a wonderful night. Thank you for stopping by. You're a fucking legend. I hope you sleep well. Get the rest you need so that you feel like a champion tomorrow. Another 200,000 served in the Imperial Russian Navy. Out of 900,000 men, the field armies deployed against France numbered less than 250,000, because they didn't have to. They just retreated in the winter and let Napoleon's fucking men deal with the weather. There's no consistent statistics for other major combatants. Austria's forces peaked about 576,000-ish. But that could be totally inflated. The general consensus historians agree on is over 400,000, but not greater than 600,000 during the War of the Sixth Coalition, and had little or no naval component, yet never fielded more than 250,000 men in field armies. And that's part of the reason why, because France always outnumbered them. It's like, what the fuck? If you have so many men, why are you only using half? Probably won't, but I appreciate the sentiment, sir. Well, shit. Even still, right? I still hope, regardless if you probably won't, I'm still gonna put it out there that you do. Right? That doesn't change what I hope for you, Dano. After Britain, Austria proved the most persistent enemy of France. More than 1 million Austrians served during the Long Wars. Its large army was overall quite homogeneous and homogeneous and solid, and in 1813 operated in Germany, 140,000 men, Italy and the Balkans, 90,000 men at its peak, about 50,000 men during most of the campaigning on these fronts. Austrian manpower was becoming quite limited towards the end of the wars, leading its generals to favor cautious and conservative strategies to limit their losses. Well, they couldn't really lose too much. Prussia never had more than 320,000 men under its arms at any time. Always like the background videos you have going on? Hell yeah, thank you. I do my best. I actually put a lot of effort into this. It'll get better as time goes on, right? I'll come up with new ideas. Chad will give me some fucking fantastic ideas, right? It'll get better as time goes on. But for now, with the shitty computer I have, it's amazing that any of this even works in the first place. So I'm thankful that that shit happens. All right, let's go. Ha! But I appreciate it. Prussia never had more than 320,000 men under armies at any time. In 1813 through 1815, the core of its army, about 100,000 men, was characterized by the competence and determination. But the bulk of its forces consisted of second and third line troops, as well as militiamen of variable strength. Many of these troops performed reasonably well and often displayed considerable bravery, but lacked the professionalism of their regular counterparts and were not as well equipped. Others were largely unfit for operations except sieges. During the 1813 campaign, 130,000 men were used in military operations, with 100,000 effectively participating in the main German campaign, and about 30,000 being used to besiege isolated French garrisons. Man, it's a lot of men. It's almost like Brian's trying to make a point when he asks this very specific question on the whatever podcast about who's the primary victim of war. Just throwing that out there. Most of these females have no clue. Like, I'll guarantee you if you asked, they should start doing that, asking how many men they think died in any of these given wars. Right? Because like I just went over, through the entire scope of the Napoleonic Wars, it was about 5 million European men. This is in the 1800s. This isn't World War I carpet bombing technology. You know what I mean? Like World War II carpet bombing technology, or today directed energy weapon kind of shit. Right? It's not like we're firing a railgun on a small island of people. It's fucking, this is the 1800s. Like, 5 million. That's a significant portion of the population in general. Shit. Spain's armies also peaked around 200,000 men, not including more than 50,000 guerrillas scattered over Spain. In addition to Maratha Empire, the Ottoman Empire, Italy, Naples, and the Duchy of Warsaw each had more than 100,000 men under arms. Even small nations now had armies rivaling the size of the great powers' forces of past wars, but most of these were poor quality forces only suitable for garrison duties. The size of their combat forces remained modest, yet they could still provide a welcome addition to major powers. The percentage of French troops in the Grande Armée, which Napoleon led into Russia, was about 50%, while the French allies also provided a significant contribution to the French forces in Spain. As these small nations joined the coalition forces in 1813 and 1814, they provided a useful addition to the coalition while depriving Napoleon of much-needed manpower. The initial stages of the Industrial Revolution had much to do with larger military forces. It became easy to mass-produce weapons and thus equip larger forces. Britain was the largest single manufacturer of armaments in this period. It supplied most of the weapons used by the coalition powers throughout the conflicts. France produced the second largest total of armaments, equipping its own huge forces as well as those of the Confederation of the Rhine and other allies. Napoleon showed innovative tendencies in his use of mobility to offset numerical disadvantages. As demonstrated in the rout of the Austro-Russian forces in 1805, in the Battle of Austerlitz, the French army redefined the role of artillery, performing independent mobile units as opposed to the previous tradition of attacking artillery pieces in the support of troops. The semaphore system had allowed the French War Minister Carnot to communicate with French forces on the frontiers throughout the 1790s. The French continued to use this system throughout the Napoleonic Wars. Aerial surveillance was used for the first time when the French used a hot air balloon to survey coalition positions before the Battle of Fleurus on the 26th of June, 1794. Yeah, you know I wasn't gonna finish this series off without talking about the French using the first fucking aerial reconnaissance. Oh my god. The fucking legends, man. And we're gonna... You know what? Let's get a bird's eye view hot air balloon. Fuck yeah, let's go, dude. Everybody's probably like, shit. They can probably see everything from up there. All of the accurate intel. Amazing. Amazing. Huge W, France, for air reconnaissance. Innovating air reconnaissance like a bunch of legends. I'm going to reread that, just to put emphasis on it. Aerial surveillance was used for the first time in history when the French used a hot air balloon to survey coalition positions before the Battle of Fleurus on the 26th of June, 1794. In the 1700s was the first air reconnaissance mission. The first flying sortie ever done was in 1794. The fucking legend. Historians have explored how Napoleonic Wars became total wars. Most historians argue that the escalation in size and scope came from two sources. First was the ideological clash between revolutionary, egalitarian, and conservative hierarchical belief systems. Yeah, France on the egalitarian bullshit. Second was the emergence of nationalism in France, Germany, Spain, and elsewhere that made these people's wars instead of the contests between monarchs, and was a huge dispute between the North and the South during the Civil War, but we'll talk about that when we get into the Civil War. Completely unnecessary and highly propagandized because, you know, history is written by the damn victors. Anyways, Bell has argued that even more important than ideology and nationalism were the intellectual transformations in the culture of the war that came through the Age of Enlightenment. One factor, he says, is that war was no longer a routine event but transforming experience for societies, a total experience. Secondly, the military emerged in its own right as a separate sphere of society distinct from the ordinary civilian world. The French Revolution made every civilian part of the war machine, either as a soldier through universal conscription or as a vital cog in the home front machinery, supporting and supplying the army. Out of that, says Bell, came militarism, the belief that the military role was morally superior to the civilian role in times of great national crisis. I mean, let's be real. If it's great national crisis and you're not going to fight for your country, you're kind of a piece of shit. Just saying. Like, holy shit, man. I think it was on the whatever podcast. Like, Andrew asked a question the other night. Andrew Wilson was talking to the girl in the corner. And she was like, oh, I don't think anybody should be conscripted. And Andrew was like, well, what if the United States, assuming, right, hypothetically, that the United States was being invaded, would you want men to be conscripted then? And she's like, no, I don't think anybody should be forced to go to war. I'm like, what? So you just roll over and take it? You just roll over and take the Wow. Wow. This is why women should not be in positions of power. Holy shit. I don't think anybody... What? No concept. Zero concept of self-defense. At all.
Whatever happens, happens. Oh my god.
Jesus. Holy shit. As Napoleon proclaimed, it's the soldier who founds a republic, and it is the soldier who maintains it. Napoleon said on his career, I closed the gulf of anarchy and brought order out of chaos. I rewarded merit regardless of birth or wealth. Wherever I found it, I abolished feudalism and restored equality to all region before the law. I fought the discrete monarchies from the old regime because the alternative was destruction of all of this. I purified the revolution. Well, would you look at that? Nothing fucking changes. She was biting those bullets hard. Dude, I'm telling you. Holy shit, man. Like, kinda, this is why I said L on the egalitarian and liberalism that, you know, France fucking started. So, here's my thing, right? A lot of people are like, a lot of people claim that feminism started in fucking, you know, Bolshevik shit. And like, well, that's where I would say modern feminism started. There was egalitarian pushes all throughout history for women to have this or women to have that. Like, the feminist thing is not a new issue. Men have just gotten weaker over time. That's my take. Hot take. Men have just gotten weaker over time. Men used to be willing to just be like, look, bitch, shut the fuck up. I don't care what you think. And guess what? Most women would be like the one in the corner on that fucking table on whatever and be like, yeah, whatever, okay, fine, blah, blah, blah. And just go along with it because, well, I have to. Just roll over and take it like she would roll over and take the invasion. And it's like, men are so in their damn feelings anymore. Such fucking crybabies nowadays. You have all these white knight simps, dude, that just lose their minds over men being fucking men. It's crazy to me. It's fucking wild. But the information of this episode doesn't stop there, because now we're going to get into some of the good nitty-gritty of the Napoleonic tactics. Right? Napoleonic tactics describe a certain battlefield principles used by national armies from the late 18th century until the invention and adoption of the rifled musket in the mid-19th century. Yeah, we still use some of his tactics to this day. Napoleonic tactics are characterized by intense drilling of soldiers. Still use some of his tactics today. Special fucking forces, buddy. Speedy battlefield movement. Combined armed assaults between infantry, cavalry, artillery, and now air support. Relatively small numbers of cannons, short-range fire, musket fire, and bayonet charges. French Emperor Napoleon I is considered by military historians to have been a master of this particular form of warfare. Military powers would continue to employ such tactics even as technological advances during the Industrial Revolutions gradually rendered them impractically obsolete, leading to the devastating losses of life in the American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War and World War I. While most of the tactics may be obsolete, there's a lot of shit that's still relevant, right? Like moving your troops quicker. The Blitzkrieg was slightly invented by Napoleon, you know what I mean? Like what we consider a Blitzkrieg is now, right? Is like sub-formally invented by Napoleon. The element of surprise was one of his fucking favorite things to use. Infantry formed the base of Napoleonic tactics as they were the largest force in all the major battles of the 18th and 19th century Europe. Many Napoleonic tactics were developed by ancient regime royalists. Strategies like Jean-Baptiste Vaquet de Gribeauval. Fuck. These names, or Jean-Pierre Duthiel, Jacques-Antoine Hippolyte. Man, it's easier to say in a French accent. Fuck it, let's do it. Pierre-Joseph Bourset. Fucking A, nailed it. Let's just be French. Why the hell not? They emphasized the flexible use of military and they abandoned marching in lines, which maximized a unit's firepower in favor of attacking in columns. Fuck, I'm terrible with names, but like if I do it in the actual accent, I guess the names do make more sense, right? Than trying to say it in an English accent, because then it comes out all fucked up and weird. Might as well just be a redneck about it. Like, God damn it. God damn it, Bobby. Dang it, Dale. Infantry used the smooth bore flintlock musket, the standard weapon of the Napoleonic era, which had scarcely changed since John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, directed British troops at the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. The flintlock musket had a short effective range for hitting man-sized targets of 50 yards, or 46 meters, to 70 yards, 64 meters. A highly trained soldier could fire once about every 15 to 20 seconds until black powder fouled and the weapon had to be cleaned before firing again. The French musket of the 1777 could fire about 100 yards, 91 meters, but suffered about one misfire out of every 6 rounds. Dang. Many soldiers on the Napoleonic battlefields were coerced into staying in battle. To overcome their individual inclination of self-preservation and to provide effective firepower, the infantry regiments fought shoulder to shoulder, at least 2 or 3 lines deep, firing in volleys. The officers and non-commissioned officers carried swords and halberds, which could be used to keep the infantrymen in the same firing line. Should a soldier shirk duty and flee from the battlefield, each army normally had a picket line of cavalry at its rear, encouraging the soldier to return to their regiment or face consequences. To assist with command and control of the infantry, each soldier would wear a colorful military uniform visible from a distance, even through the black powder clouds hovering over Napoleonic battlefields. Napoleon himself did not underestimate the importance of morale and said once that morale, force rather than numbers, decides victory. He's not wrong. If morale is depleted, people give up. People stop trying. People stop thinking. They stop, their IQ goes down. their ability to care and push on goes away. Morale has hit the floor. It's game over. Once morale is done, the battle's lost. Most Napoleonic battles took place on farm fields, villages, roads, and streams. French troops regarded cities, mountains, swamps, and heavy woods as unsuitable combat arenas. Commanders such as Duke of Wellington at the Battle of Waterloo sought out terrain suitable for their forces. Infantry regiments used 3 primary battle formations: column formation, line formation, and infantry square. The first formation, known as the column formation, because of its narrow long-term, suited soldiers marching down a road or moving quickly towards the enemy across an open field, because the column formation was a large target for muskets and cannon. Regiments would normally change formation as the enemy drew closer. Cavalry units had many responsibilities on the battlefield as they were mounted on horses. They were the fastest moving forces. They would perform screening duties, which consisted of identifying the size, strength, and location of enemy forces while trying to prevent the enemy from doing the same. Cavalry also provided the shock element on the Napoleonic-era battlefield. Much like a tank in the 20th and 21st centuries, the short effective range, long reload times, and rapid fouling of the smooth-bore musket meant that cavalry units could quickly close in on infantry units before the horsemen could be overwhelmed with musket fire. Cavalry units were also responsible for fixing enemy forces in place, typically by charging at infantry units, which would respond by forming into semi-static squares. If the infantry unit failed to form a square, quite often they would be overrun by charging cavalry and forced to flee the battlefield en masse. Cavalry units often fought against other cavalry units to essentially neutralize one another. The speed of cavalry units made them capable of suppressing enemy forces, especially as these battlefields were often covered in thick smoke generated by the black powder muskets, cannon, and howitzer. Cavalry units also protected generals and marshals, since these officers were usually mounted and were likely to move too quickly on the battlefield to be protected by infantry. And finally, the Napoleonic era saw many developments in artillery. Field artillery, also known as light artillery, is a class of mobile artillery that backs up armies on the battlefield. These guns were developed with an emphasis towards maneuverability, mobility, and accuracy over long distance and speed. Mobile artillery advancements date back to King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden in the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. Adolphus is recognized as being the first military commander to mass his light artillery units into batteries and employed them in combination with other arms. By the mid-18th century, commanders from various nations had arrived at the conclusion that mobile artillery could accompany the rest of the army was a necessity. No longer would artillery's influence be limited to its immediate firing range. Field artillery would instead become a key component in shifting the tides on the battlefield. After the reorganization of the army into corps, the French army established semi-autonomous artillery formations that were led and coordinated by artillery officers. These formations were successful in demonstrating the potential tactical and offensive power of field artillery out on the battlefield during the Napoleonic period. Field artillery consisted of foot artillery, horse artillery, and mountain artillery. It was the most devastating weapon on the field during the Napoleonic era, and its use could leave the enemy troops demoralized. Solid metal cannonballs, also known as round shot, were commonly used artillery ammunition. They were effective against square formations and heavily packed columns when fired almost parallel to the ground, for they would bounce into enemy forces with gruesome results, taking out limbs and life in tow. Just destroy. Gnarly, dude. Bowling. Human bowling with artillery. Essentially, the round shot would bounce a few times and start to roll, ripping through anything in its wake. Taking this into consideration, artillery crews often sought out hard, flat, open terrain. At extremely close range, artillery could use canister shot, large tin cans holding a large number of small bullets. Another variation of this was scatter shot, or a canister or heavy cloth bag filled with nails or other scrap iron. Oh my god. Just get artillery blasted with a bunch of silverware. That's crazy. Holy shit. Basically, the firing of the canisters was the equivalent to using a giant shotgun to disintegrate incoming troops. Yet another variation was grape shot, a heavy cloth bag packed well with larger ammunition, which got its name from its appearance as being a bundle of grapes. Napoleon employed a variation of this tactic to crush the Vendémiaire uprising. Besides cannons, artillery was made up of howitzers and other types of guns that used ammunition that packed an explosive punch, also known as explosive shells. Explosive shells had a reputation for being unreliable since they would often explode either too early or not at all. However, in the cases in which the shell exploded on the target, the results were devastating, especially towards cavalry units. Man, would you look at that? And that be the completion. The full total. 100% of the Napoleonic Wars. I'm just kidding. It's not a 100% completion. If we were doing like video game trophies, that was like a 70% completion. There were some other things I could have gone into deeper detail, but man, we'd be sitting here forever talking about it. Gotta move on. Got other wars and other stuff to talk about. I can always come back to individual battles or this or that at a later time. But next is the War of 1812, fought by the United States and its allies against the United Kingdom and its allies in North America. It began when the United States declared war on Britain on the 18th of June, 1812, although peace terms were agreed on in the December 1814 Treaty of Ghent. The war did not officially end until the peace treaty was ratified by the United States Congress on the 17th of February 1815, 3 years later. So that's what we're going to get into next time. Some Anglo-American tensions over territorial expansion. That's right. Pretty sure the Royal Navy was trying to force U.S. sailors to be like a part of their military too, which is kind of fucked. But yeah, that's what we're going over next time. It's the War of 1812. And I do believe Fredo had requested some Ottoman Empire stuff, so I gotta ask him exactly what. Because there's a lot of Ottoman Empire shit. That's in one part of the world that's just consistently been at war since the dawn of time. So, I can pull any plethora of things from the Ottoman Empire. I just need to know exactly what war he wants me to specifically focus on, because 1812 is not going to take me very long. The war was only 3 years. And while it was bloody and some crazy shit happened, like one of the largest explosions, if not the largest explosion ever detonated in history at that point by the British in Canada at some holdout. Like, I can't remember the exact story. I'm sure we'll get into it, right? But, like, they blew up a bunch of shit. It was like tons and tons of gunpowder and ammunition and cannonballs that were just scattered out like fucking shrapnel from a grenade. Wild. Wild. The War of 1812 was nuts. Nuts, buddy. It was nuts. Anyways. Man. That was it. That's all. That's all I have for you guys tonight. I don't have too much more. I don't have too much more. Plus, I'm tired as fuck. Shit, man. I don't know if I'm like fucking caught some kind of bug or some shit, but holy fuck, man. It's been impossible to be like, get up and do shit. Despite all that, I have. But still difficult, you know? When you feel like shit. Either way, I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it here. Go get some sleep or some shit. I don't know. I don't know where necessarily to send you guys. I don't know who is live or even how to set up a raid. I guess I should learn that, huh? Well, guess I'll leave you to your own devices. That being said, hope everybody has a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Doesn't matter where you're at in the world. Enjoy your time, because it may be limited. You might go to open your soda, and it detonates right there, just leaving you a cloud of pink mist in the middle of the walkway. Very unfortunate circumstance. Probability next to nothing. But it's still possible. That being said, enjoy your time, because you never know what the hell could happen. One moment, you're there. Next moment, you're fucking not. Don't regret it. That being said, I'll talk to y'all next time. I might be live tomorrow night. Same time, 12:30 Central Standard Time. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. As for me, my time is up. Catch y'all next time.
I just wish he knew. just wish he knew.